Welcome to the R for Data Science exercise walkthrough series. My name is Thomas, and today we continue our journey in Chapter 5, Data Transformation, more specifically in Chapter 5.4, Select Columns with Select. Let's jump straight into the first exercise. Brainstorm as many ways as possible to select these 4 columns from the flights dataset. All right, so let's get straight into RStudio. Quickly load up the dplyr package, as well as the NYC Flights 13 package to get started. All right, just quickly, if we look at the names of the flights dataset, that's the column names. So this is all we got, and we want the departure time, the departure delay, the arrival time, as well as the arrival delay. The obvious choice is to use the select function with flights as first dataset, and then just spell out the individual column names that we are interested in. And that sure enough works. As you can see, we get all the 4 columns that we want. The cool thing about the select function though is the use of the select helpers. And one of those helpers is the starts with function. So what we can do instead of spelling out these names is we can do select flights, and now we use starts underscore with, and we pass it a string which the column names should match in the beginning. So for example, DEP, that would match departure time and departure delay. And we can simply put a comma here and do another call to starts with and use ARR. And that should get us these 4 columns as well. And indeed it does. And we even have the same order because when I specified it manually, I did it like this. But you may get a different order. And that may or may not be something good or something bad. Now, next up, instead of using the starts with helper, we can also try out to use the ends with helper. So, for example, we can pass time and then a second ends with and use delay. And as you can see, actually we get now more columns than we wanted. So this did not work out quite as well as I thought, but just to illustrate the point, you have starts with, you have ends with. We will in a second also learn about contains. So the select function from dplyr is extremely powerful because of these select helpers. Next up, what happens if you include the name of a variable multiple times in a select call? Well, let's give it a try and see what happens. Select flights. Let's say, for example, we take departure time, departure delay, and then once again, departure time. And as you can see, the second time you specify the same column name, it's basically ignored. So since you had departure time as the first in your list of columns, it will actually appear as the very first column. Delay is the second, and then if you repeat the same variable name again, it's just dropped from the output. Next up, what does the AnyOf function do? So AnyOf again is one of those select helpers. Why might it be helpful in conjunction with this vector? Well, let's find out. Copy that vector, go to RStudio, paste. So as you can see, this is a character vector. This is all strings, but when you use the select function, you never put quotes around the column names. You just type out the name as if this were a variable. However, if you actually have such a character vector of column names, then this AnyOf and also its kind of brother or sister, the AllOf select helper, is extremely handy. So let's illustrate this. So select vars, and now I do AnyOf vars, and obviously the data set is not called vars but flights. And this should return all those 5 columns, and in fact it does. So now an interesting thing about AnyOf is that if you specify a column that is not in the data set, it will more or less simply ignore it. So for example, let's remove that y here from arrival delay. and try this once again. So as you can see, we now only get 4 columns, and we didn't get any kind of feedback or a warning saying that, hey, you specified a column which is not actually part of the data set. If, however, we choose to do the all of helper instead of any of, then sure enough, we get an error even. And it tells us that we can't subset columns that don't exist in the dataset. I would agree with that. Personally, I prefer the all of helper, but I guess there are instances in which the any of helper comes in handy as well. So all of is extremely strict and any of is kind of extremely loose. Okay, on to the last one. Does the result of running the following code surprise you? How do the select helpers deal with case by default? How can you change the default? Okay, so we have here select flights, and then we use the contains helper, and then we specify in all caps time. Let's see what we get by pasting this into RStudio. And as you can see, we get all columns back that contain time in them. But if you kind of know R's default behavior, you know that it is case sensitive. So actually for me, when I saw this the first time, this was very surprising. I would have expected to actually get back no columns at all. So if we look into the help page of the contains helper by doing help, contains, and then we select these from the tidy select package here. And we scroll down a bit, we can see that contains as well as the other select helpers here all have this ignore.case argument, and it's set to true by default. So if we want to get strict, then we can say ignore.case and set it to false. And as you can see, in that case, you don't get back any columns at all because no column contains uppercase time. All right, that's it for this episode. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something about select and the very useful select helpers. If you liked the video, make sure to subscribe to the channel to get alerts about future videos. Leave a like down below and see you in the next